everybody, Jim here, welcome back to Mad Panic Gaming, where today fists will fly, lead pipes will be swung, and we might even see a few broken bottles come into play because today we're taking a look at a big bunch of arcade beat-em-ups, some of which had home ports, and some that to this day have still never seen the light of day outside the walls of the almighty arcade. And we're getting started today with what I and many people believe is one of Capcom's all-time best beat-em-ups, and that is the ever so awesome Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. This is a 1993 release and is one of the few games that was made specifically for the CPS Dash, an updated version of Capcom's CPS-1 hardware that was released roughly a year before the CPS-2. And if you're not familiar with Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, its original iteration was a comic book series called Xenozoic Tales, which was later adapted into an animated series and rechristened Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, a show about the struggles between good and evil in a post-apocalyptic world where dinosaurs once again roam the earth. It was a very short-lived series with only 13 episodes, but in that brief window of time, Capcom was granted a license, and that's how we ended up with this amazing game. So, what makes Cadillacs and Dinosaurs so special, you might be wondering? Well, for starters, the premise alone makes for an interesting setting for a beat-em-up. There weren't many at the time that let you punch dinosaurs, blast your enemies to bits with rocket launchers, and run them down in a hot rod. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. The core gameplay is very solid and fun. You have 4 unique characters to choose from and multiplayer for up to 3 people. And this game moves at a pretty brisk pace and throws a ton of enemies at you at any one given time. You've got your standard attack combo, dash attacks, super attacks, and a ton of weapons to pick up, including old standbys like knives and baseball bats, and a surprising amount of firearms, including the aforementioned rocket launcher, pistols, shotguns, machine guns, and grenades, which annihilate bad guys and turn them into nothing more than some bloody chunks. Throw in a bunch of really cool boss battles with some insane and often disgusting characters, and you've got a recipe for one delicious beat-em-up. And that's not even mentioning the absolutely beautiful visuals or the kick-ass soundtrack, both of which this game has in spades. It's actually one of the best looking and sounding games to be released by Capcom at this time, and it's technically not even a CPS-2 game, which makes it just that much more impressive. This is seriously one of Capcom's best beat-em-ups, and one of the best arcade beat-em-ups I've ever played, and I highly recommend it to anyone that considers themselves a fan of the genre. Unfortunately though, this is a game that, as far as I know, has never had a proper home port, which is a real shame. But if you've got an emulator set up like MAME or Final Burn, then by all means, load up Cadillacs and Dinosaurs and take it for a spin.
Final uppercut! Final uppercut!
Next up, let's take a look at what is probably the prettiest damn beat-em-up ever made, and that's Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon from 1995, which was published by Banpresto and developed by Gazelle. And if you're not familiar with them, Gazelle is one of the developers that formed after Toaplan shut down. So a lot of the staff that worked on this game had already worked on some epic arcade games. And all things considered, I'd say they crushed it with this one too. The plot, which honestly isn't all that important in this case, is taken from the first season of the anime, when the Sailor Scouts must defend the Earth from the Dark Kingdom led by the evil Queen Beryl. And this game was actually supervised by Naoko Takeuchi, the creator of Sailor Moon. And the cast of the anime once again provide the voices for their respective characters. So if you're a Sailor Moon fan, this game was made especially for you. There's more to this game than just fan service though, it's also a pretty well made and fun, albeit very simple beat 'em up. You have all 5 Sailor Scouts to choose from, and the control scheme is pretty much the same as any other beat 'em up you've ever played. You have a basic combo, throws, jump attacks, dash attacks, and a special attack that drains just a bit of health. Something unique though is that each character has a handful of super attacks that trigger a brief animation before hitting every character on the screen. You can only do this by collecting crystals, but the more you hang on to, the more powerful of an attack you can perform. Kind of similar to the magic system in Golden Axe, which is pretty cool. If nothing else, it definitely makes this a much more visually interesting game. In fact, on the whole, this is a great looking game, very colorful with detailed environments, and the character models look like they were lifted directly from the anime, which again shows what you can do when the actual creator and designer of the series is supervising the project. The weakest aspect of the game, I would say, is the sound design, which definitely isn't bad, mind you. Just that some of the BGM is a bit hit or miss, but mostly pretty good. Aside from that though, this is a solid and well-made beat 'em up that I had a lot of fun with. There were some Sailor Moon console beat 'em ups, which are fun in their own right, but this particular game has never had a release outside of arcades. So as always, grab a ROM, load up MAME, and prepare to feel pretty. Next up, we have an all-time great and one of my personal favorite arcade beat-em-ups ever, and that is The Punisher from 1993. And between this and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, I'd say Capcom was having an amazing year. And this is another game developed on the CPS Dash, which, in addition to providing better sound and visual quality, also made it possible to have way more character sprites on screen at one time, along with some cool visual effects. It's also worth mentioning that this was the game that kick-started the partnership between Capcom and Marvel, which would result in some of the greatest arcade fighting games ever made. If you've never played it before, The Punisher does have a lot in common with other beat-em-ups, but with the similar setting and same developer, I'd say it most closely resembles Final Fight. You get 2 playable characters, those being the Punisher himself and Nick Fury, which is a pretty cool team-up, I must say. And then you hit the streets of New York, beating the hell out of the Kingpin's lackeys until ultimately confronting the big guy himself. The controls are fairly standard for a beat 'em up, but something the Punisher does really well is offering you a ton of different weapon pickups, and encourages you to use as many as possible, as this is one of the few beat 'em ups I've ever played where the melee weapons have limited durability, so you can't just pick up one and call it a day. You get old standbys like lead pipes, knives, and baseball bats, but also some especially brutal battle axes and katana swords, which suit the Punisher very well. He's a kill first and ask questions later kind of guy. But better yet, this game also implements a bit of gunplay. There are segments in each stage where you'll whip out some pistols with unlimited ammo and start blasting everything in sight. And you can also pick up Uzis, assault rifles, flamethrowers, and even hold a stock of grenades that make short work of criminal scum. The resulting gameplay is frantic, destructive, moderately challenging, and very fun. Again, it's one of my personal favorite beat-em-ups ever, and for good reason. Also, this is both a great looking and sounding game with some big character sprites, colorful and detailed environments, and some pretty good music and sound effects too. Plus, this is just a great use of the Punisher license. It's 100% non-stop action, just as it should be. There was a port of this game on the Sega Genesis released in 1994, which obviously isn't nearly as good as the arcade game, but still a great bit of fun. But as of the writing of this video, the arcade original is being ported to modern consoles as part of the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. So one way or another, play this game at your earliest convenience and dish out some serious punishment. Next up, a little bit of Neo Geo action for a nice change of pace, and another one of my personal favorite beat-em-ups. And that is 1992's Mutation Nation from SNK. And this is a game that as soon as I heard the name, saw the poster, and read a brief plot synopsis, I knew I was going to love it because it features a bunch of my favorite elements from any good arcade game and or schlocky 80s sci-fi action movie. It's set in the not-too-distant future when a mad scientist has been experimenting with bizarre genetic mutations and created a substance that can turn normal human beings into grotesque monsters that follow his every command, with the intentions of taking over the world with his legions of mutated freaks. But at the same time, our two heroes, Ricky Jones and Johnny Hart, return to their old neighborhood to discover the chaos and resolve to kick some ass and save the day. So that's a perfect premise for a beat-em-up if you ask me, and what we get is a fairly straightforward game in terms of gameplay. It's not terribly complex, and you might be disappointed to learn that there are no weapon pickups, which typically is a must for any good beat-em-up. Mutation Nation makes up for that though by giving you a variety of really cool super attacks to employ. As you progress through the game, you'll come across multicolored orbs that you can pick up, and each one carries with it a super attack that can be executed by simply holding down the attack button for a couple of seconds. And these are absolutely devastating, annihilating any lesser enemies on screen and dealing a ton of damage to bosses. Even if you don't have any orbs available, you can still pull off an awesome but slightly less effective super attack. Aside from that, this is just your basic walk to the right and beat the hell out of everything affair. But the gameplay is smooth, responsive, and very fun. You'll be dealing with a bunch of enemies all at once, and they come in a wide variety of mutated monstrosities, including some huge and especially grotesque bosses to contend with. The gameplay is solid for sure, but definitely the visuals and premise go a long way to make this game as appealing as I think it is. Great character designs, big sprites, detailed stages, and generally just some really nice art direction, very emblematic of SNK in the early 90s, and the sound design is excellent too, with some great music to kick some ass to. There were only a handful of Neo Geo beat-em-ups, but for my money, Mutation Nation is the best of the bunch. And it's been ported numerous times both digitally and physically to various consoles. So one way or another, give this game a try if you haven't already. It's seriously awesome. Next up, yet another Capcom classic, this time from 1994, and that is Dungeons and Dragons: The Tower of Doom. which is the first of 2 Capcom-developed D&D games, with the second being Shadow over Mystara from 1996. And it harkens back to some of Capcom's other early 90s fantasy games, namely The King of Dragons, which itself felt like a D&D game just without the license. Before playing this game, I was honestly a bit skeptical. Taking a strictly tabletop RPG series and converting it into a side-scrolling beat-em-up doesn't exactly seem like it should work. But if history has taught us anything, it's that pretty much any property can be converted into a belt-action brawler. Whether that be The Simpsons, Hook, Steven Seagal, the Ninja Turtles, or in this case D&D. And as it turns out, this isn't just a good beat-em-up, it's a great one. The premise is that an evil archlich named Deimos has unleashed his hordes of monsters upon the lands of Darrick. So it's up to our heroes to battle back the forces of darkness, liberate the downtrodden, and ultimately face down the Dark Lord in his titular Tower of Doom. The game gives you 4 characters to choose from that represent different races and classes from the tabletop game. So you get a fighter, a cleric, an elf, and a dwarf, and they each play uniquely from the others. So for example, the fighter is obviously your best character for a good balance of high attack and defensive powers, but he can't use the array of cool magic spells available to the cleric, who in this case is basically a battle mage. So it's worth playing as all of the different characters to find your favorite. Also, this game is loaded with various monsters from the D&D world, including some epic boss battles against the likes of a troll, a beholder, a massive black dragon, and of course, the archlich Deimos himself. You also periodically get to choose between multiple branching paths that have you playing through different levels and slightly altering the way the story progresses. So we have a beat 'em up that actually has some replay value beyond just being an overall fun game to play. There are also tons of items and loot for you to pick up, including sub-weapons, magic rings that allow you to perform various attacks, scrolls, health power-ups, and lots of gold coins that you can use in the item shops between stages, purchasing more weapons and items as needed. You even level up over time, increasing your health and other various attributes. So Capcom really did do their best to make this feel like a proper hybrid of beat 'em up and RPG. And all things considered, I'd say they did a damn good job. The core gameplay is solid and fun, the story and characters are fairly faithful to the source material, there's a good bit of variety, and this game is even a bit longer than your average beat 'em up from the day, typically taking over an hour to complete. Factor in the beautiful visuals and fantastic sound design, and you've got an all-around great game. And believe it or not, the sequel is even better. But we'll get around to that one some other time. As far as ports are concerned, Tower of Doom was released in Japan on the Sega Saturn in 1999 as part of the D&D collection, and later digitally on the 7th generation consoles as part of the Dungeons & Dragons Chronicles of Mystara collection. So again, whatever way you can, play the Tower of Doom immediately, because it's awesome. And last, but certainly not least, we have what many people believe to be one of, if not the best, arcade beat-em-ups ever made. And that is Konami's X-Men from 1992, which is based on the short-lived Pride of the X-Men animated series, which was an okay show, I suppose. It kind of got the generic G.I. Joe formula prevalent in 80s cartoons, but it certainly doesn't hold a candle to the show that started airing in 1992, not long after this game's release. The plot is as straightforward as it gets. Magneto sends out his minions from the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants to wreak havoc on humanity. So the X-Men step up to battle them back, and when Magneto kidnaps Professor X and Kitty Pryde, our heroes make their way to Asteroid M to rescue their comrades and have a final showdown with the Master of Magnetism. X-Men definitely has a lot in common with other Konami beat-em-ups, in particular The Simpsons and Turtles in Time. But it makes the best use it can of the license. It gives you 6 playable characters to choose from, which is quite a lot by the standards of the genre. And they include Cyclops, Wolverine, Dazzler, Colossus, Storm, and Nightcrawler, each playing a bit differently from the others, but most importantly wielding their unique mutant powers. You can perform your mutant power attacks with the push of a button, but if you run out of power icons, you have to sacrifice a bit of health to use this ability, which honestly always annoyed me. If I'm playing as Cyclops, for example, I don't really want to be limited to just punching and kicking enemies. I want to go crazy with optic blasts. True, that would make the game a lot easier, but it would also be awesome. Wolverine is probably the most unscathed of any character though, since no matter what, you still get to annihilate bad guys with his adamantium claws. The gameplay is fast-paced and fun though, and they cram a ton of enemies on screen at any one given time. Plus, the boss battles against the likes of the Blob, Juggernaut, and Magneto are a lot of fun too. The real drawback with this game, and beat-em-ups in general really, is that without some other players, they're nowhere near as fun. X-Men famously had a 4-player and even a 6-player model, which, if you can get 5 friends together, is a ton of fun. But this time around I was limited to just 2 players, but still had a great time revisiting this old classic. Also, it has to be said that for the time it was made, this is a beautiful game to look at with some great looking and very detailed character sprites and stages, plus some great cutscenes complete with horrible voice acting thrown in for good measure, and another excellent Konami soundtrack that they just seemed to have a knack for at the time. So while I personally wouldn't say it's the best beat 'em up ever, X-Men is certainly high in the running and still very much worth playing today. It was released digitally many years ago on the 7th gen consoles and also got the arcade 1-up treatment. But of course, if you have no other option, MAME is your best friend. Load up X-Men and welcome to die. X-Men. So there you go everybody, those are a bunch of arcade beat 'em ups, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you had as much fun watching it as I did making it. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of any of these games, and what is your favorite arcade beat 'em up. What arcade beat 'em ups should I cover in the next video? I always like hearing from you, and until next time, thanks for watching everybody, and take care, stay awesome. Goodbye.